Chapter 11. What Fire Leaves Behind. Morning came with silver light and the scent of wet earth. The storm had passed, but its echo remained. Puddles in the garden, broken branches in the yard, silence in the walls like a held breath. Elias was still there, asleep on the couch, one arm across his chest, a blanket slipping to the floor. His jaw was unshaven, his shirt still damp at the cuffs. And in that moment, with the fireplace embers glowing low behind him, he looked peaceful. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching him, just being. The quiet returned. He woke to the sound of the kettle whistling. His eyes opened slowly, and when they met mine, they didn't widen in surprise or guilt, only warmth. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Hey." No one rushed to define anything. He sat up, stretched. I handed him a mug of coffee. He accepted it like it was sacred. For a while, we just drank in silence. No words. But a new kind of knowing sat between us. The studio. Later, we went down to the studio. It was a mess. The floor still damp. A few sketches ruined beyond saving. The scent of mildew already beginning to thread the air. I stood in the center of it and let the weight of the loss settle over me. Elias stepped beside me, arms crossed. "We can fix it," he said. I nodded. "I know." But still, I didn't move. Because part of me needed to feel what was broken. And part of me didn't want this to be another moment we covered up with drywall and silence. The conversation. Later, over toast and jam, it came. Not a planned talk, not a reckoning, just the truth. "I didn't kiss you because of the storm," he said. I looked up. "I kissed you because I couldn't not kiss you anymore. Something caught in my throat." He went on. "I've been standing outside something for weeks, Sophia, watching it through glass, wanting to knock, wanting to be let in, but not wanting to break the window to do it. My eyes stung. I let you in," I whispered. "I know. But I didn't want to step in without knowing if I could stay." What I said. I reached across the table and took his hand, held it gently, like a decision. "I don't know what this is yet," I said. "I don't know what it wants to become, but I know it feels real, and I know I don't want to go back to before." His fingers tightened around mine. "That's enough," he said. "For me, a choice." Later that day, I pulled Luca's sunroom sketches out from the shelf. I had avoided them for weeks, months really, but now I saw them differently. They weren't haunted. They were hopeful, and I began to rework them. Not to erase what Luca made, but to add what I needed. What Elias had shown me. Windows that opened. Corners with space for quiet. A view of the sea. A place to stay. That evening, Elias helped me clear the floor. We didn't talk much. Just moved together. Smooth, familiar, side by side like we were building more than a house. When we finished, we stood by the open door and watched the tide roll in. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. I turned to him. "Good," I replied, "because I think I'm finally ready to stay too." Chapter 12. The Letter and the Lie. It arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address, no handwritten name, just my full name typed neatly on the front. Sophia Leclerc. I almost didn't open it. It looked like one of those cold letters, estate documents, delayed invoices, something bureaucratic and bloodless. But when I did, the world tipped slightly off-center. The letter. It was from Julien Sartre, Luca's former business partner, the one I hadn't spoken to since the funeral. "Dear Sophia, I debated for a long time whether or not to send this, but I believe you deserve to know the truth. Luca's final project, the one you're now building, was not just a home. It was a debt, something he took on to cover the fallout from an earlier failure. He never told you, and I never pushed him to. But the house, your house, was meant to be a kind of repayment. He never believed he'd finish it. He never planned to. Julien, I read the letter 3 times. Each time it hit harder. The implication was clear. Luca had lied. Not just about the project, but about his intentions. He never thought he'd live long enough to finish it. The disbelief. I sat in the sunroom, the one I'd finally started designing again, and stared at the blueprints like they were in a language I'd never learned. Elias found me like that. Bad news, he asked. I didn't answer, just handed him the letter. He read it, folded it, set it down, but he didn't speak. Not until I asked, "Did you know?" "No," he said, "but I'm not surprised." The rift. His words struck like a cracked down glass. "You're not surprised?" I repeated. Elias looked out the window, jaw tight. He was a good man, Sophia, but he was also scared. "You think he gave up?" "I think he didn't know how to ask for help." I stood. "So what? I've been building a lie." "No," he said quickly, standing too. "You've been building your way through it. But he left me with this house and this grief and this unknown. And maybe that's why you have to finish it." The fight that wasn't. We didn't yell. We didn't storm off. But something in the air shifted, a new silence. Not cold, just fragile, like we'd stepped on sacred ground and weren't sure how to walk without cracking something. I left the room first, not out of anger, but because I needed space. And Elias, to his credit, didn't follow. The ghost of intention. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Luca's voice in old memories. Laughter in the kitchen, plans at the dining table, that damn humming. And now all of it tasted different. Had he known he was sick? Was it guilt? Or was he trying to protect me by never saying? I didn't have answers, only echoes, morning clarity. The next morning, I found Elias on the back porch. He looked tired. I sat beside him. Didn't speak at first. Then, "Do you think he would have finished it if he'd lived?" Elias took a long breath. "I think he would have tried. But I also think he left it for you." I frowned. "As a burden? No. As a bridge. Maybe he didn't know how to give you love cleanly, but he gave you a way to build something with him, even after. A choice again." I looked at Elias. He met my eyes. "I'm scared this changes everything," I said. "It doesn't," he replied. "It just makes it more honest." I nodded. And for the first time since the letter came, I felt the truth settle in, not like a weight, but like an anchor. And I whispered the only thing I knew for sure, still building it. For him, for me, and now, maybe even for us. Chapter 13, to be held, not fixed. It rained again that night. Not a storm, not thunder, just soft, steady rain like someone whispering over the roof. The kind of rain that made everything slow down. Thoughts, breathing, memory. I was in bed, lying on my side, staring at the window. The letter still haunted me. Luca's silence. Elias's steady calm. And the quiet space between who I used to be and who I was slowly becoming. And then a knock. Just 2 soft taps at my bedroom door. The door between us. I opened it. Elias stood there barefoot, his shirt wrinkled, hair slightly damp from a shower or maybe just the air. He didn't say anything, neither did I. We just stood there for a second. Then I stepped back, and he stepped in. Not a fix. He didn't reach for me. He didn't try to kiss me or undress me or even touch me. He just sat on the edge of the bed and said, "You don't have to carry this alone." I nodded, but I don't know how to set it down. He looked at me then, not with pity, but knowing. "I don't want to fix you," he said softly. "I just want to be here. While you figure it out." The first touch, I crawled beneath the covers and pulled them back for him. He lay beside me, a careful distance at first, as if asking permission with every breath. I reached out first, my hand on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my palm. Then his hand found my hip, warm and tentative, resting there like a question. We moved closer, not out of desire, not yet, but out of something older, need, trust, quiet recognition, a kiss in stillness. When we kissed, it wasn't fire, it was weightlessness. A kiss like breath returning, like memory softening, like the exact opposite of being alone. I curled into him after, his arms around me, our legs tangled under the quilt. The rain sang its soft rhythm on the roof above us. And for the first time since Luca died, I let myself believe I didn't need to be fully healed to be fully held. The vulnerability. We didn't sleep right away. We talked in whispers, the kind of conversation that only exists between midnight and dawn. He told me about a girl he once loved in Cairo, how it ended before it began. I told him about the night Luca came home drunk after their first real fight and fell asleep outside her bedroom door like a stray. He told me about waking up in barracks, certain he'd never feel warmth again. I told him about Prague and the ceiling leak in my first solo apartment, and the time I cried in an elevator with a stranger who gave me half a chocolate bar. We didn't fix anything, we just shared it. And somehow, that was enough. What we didn't say. There was still so much unsaid. What this meant, where we were going, how the past still curled around both our ankles like smoke. But it didn't matter, not yet, because what we had in that moment was stillness and the silent agreement, you don't have to be okay yet, you just have to be here, dawn. He kissed my shoulder in the morning before rising, soft, barely there, like a promise without pressure. And when I rolled over into the empty space he left behind, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like the beginning of something chosen. Chapter 14, The House That Breathes. We started with the floors. Elias sanded the warped boards layer by layer until the grain came back to life. I painted the window frames Luca had once left raw, pale sea glass green. The color he hated, the one I'd loved since childhood. We didn't talk much while we worked. But there was music. Nina Simone, Leonard Cohen. The kind of songs that filled the air like low sunlight, steady, forgiving. The house began to hum again, not with sorrow, but with presence. The forgotten drawer. It was mid-morning when I found it, a small drawer in Luca's old drafting desk, stuck, warped shut from water damage. Elias helped pry it open. Inside, barely disturbed, a faded Polaroid of us as kids, a cafe receipt from Lisbon, and a thumb drive. Labeled in Luca's uneven handwriting to S, if you ever stay. The voice I hadn't heard. We didn't wait. Elias plugged it into his laptop right there on the kitchen counter, dust still in our hair. There was only one file, an audio recording. Timestamp 2 months before he died. I clicked play. And suddenly, his voice. Soph, if you're hearing this, I guess that means I was right. You came back. Pause, I didn't tell you what happened with the Devereaux project, how bad it got. I was ashamed. I signed a contract I shouldn't have. Lost more than money. Pause, but this house, I wanted to leave you something that wasn't ruined. Something you could change. Not fix, just change. Make yours. Let it hold you when I couldn't. Long breath, I knew you wouldn't come if I asked. But I hoped the walls would call you. I hoped they'd remind you that we were always more than what broke us. I stopped the recording halfway through. I couldn't breathe. The grief that changed shape. Elias wrapped his arms around me from behind, slow, certain. I didn't cry like I had before, sharp, broken, loud. This time the grief came soft, like rain on windows, like wind through curtains, like a song you haven't heard in years, but still remember all the words to. Luca had left me more than a house. He'd left me a choice, and a kind of permission I didn't know I needed. The studio lives again. That afternoon, I moved my drawings back into the studio, wiped each surface, opened every window, lit a candle. It no longer felt haunted, it felt held. Elias hung the shelves. I sorted the sketches, and by evening we stood in the center of the room, quiet, content. This place breathes again, I said softly. He looked around. No, you do. A note from the past. Later, when we replayed the recording in full, we reached the very end. One more sentence, a whisper. Don't forget to let someone love you, even if it's quiet, even if it's new. Chapter 15, Let Me Be the One. It began with the sound of rain again, this time not from the sky but from the sea, soft waves against the shore, echoing through the open window like memory. Elias sat on the edge of my bed, facing the window. His back was bare. There were scars, not dramatic, not ugly, just quiet lines across his shoulder blades, like punctuation in a sentence I hadn't learned how to read, the stillness between us. He didn't move when I sat beside him. I wrapped a blanket around both our shoulders, and for a moment, we just watched the night tide roll in. Then, softly, he said, "There was a boy." I stayed quiet. Afghanistan. He was maybe 15. He carried groceries for our unit. I gave him my old boots once. Another pause. He stepped onto mine, right outside the gate. I heard it, ran, found what was left. I turned toward him. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. I held him until he stopped breathing. What he needed to say. I didn't sleep for 4 nights. I kept hearing his voice. Or thinking I did. It wasn't until I came back, months later, that I realized I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of coming home to nothing. I rested my hand on his, and he finally looked at me. But now, I think I was wrong about what I deserve, about what's waiting. His voice broke, and I think I want it to be you. What I said. The silence after his words wasn't empty. It was full of trembling, of beating hearts, of every word I hadn't yet dared to say. And then I spoke. "You scare me." He blinked. "Why?" "Because I've built a whole life around not needing anyone, around being strong, around surviving." I touched his chest where the scars ended. "But with you, I don't want to just survive." His eyes glistened. "I want to choose. You. This. Every day." The first "I love you," I didn't mean to say it. Not right then. But it came anyway. Soft, unshaken. "I love you, Elias." He inhaled like he hadn't taken a full breath in weeks, then leaned forward, forehead to mine, and whispered, "Then let me be the one." What that meant. Let me be the one who waits, the one who listens, the one who doesn't fix, just stays, the one who knows how to hold without undoing. And I let him. The night we shared. That night wasn't about passion. It wasn't about escape. It was about presence. About 2 people who had been broken in different ways, learning how to let each other rest. There were kisses. Yes. But more than that, there was space, safety, the kind of intimacy that doesn't have to be loud to be real. We fell asleep chest to chest, and for once I didn't dream of Luca or silence or water rising. I dreamed of windows open to morning and footsteps returning home. Chapter 16, When the Light Changes. There's a moment in late afternoon, just before sunset, when everything turns gold. Not yellow, not orange, but soft, luminous gold, like the air is holding its breath. Elias and I sat on the porch during that light, legs tangled, the last of our coffee cooling between us. We talked about silly things, paint colors, pie recipes, what kind of dog we'd adopt someday. It felt easy, like we could stay in that moment forever. But light, like time, always shifts the message. The call came just after dinner. He stepped outside to take it. I watched him through the kitchen window. His face didn't move. His body didn't flinch. But something hardened. When he came back inside, I didn't have to ask. He sat down at the table, eyes on the floor. Then they're redeploying me. The cold return. I didn't react at first, didn't shout, didn't cry. I just stood there, the air around us suddenly still, like the storm had returned without wind or rain. "When?" I asked. 2 weeks, maybe less. And then he looked up. I didn't think this would happen again, not after they discharged me. But they've asked, not ordered, it's optional. But you feel like you owe it. He nodded once, and I hated how well I understood. What it meant. We didn't argue. There was nothing to fight against. No villain in the story, just time. And the question it always leaves behind, is love strong enough, early enough, deep enough to survive being pulled apart? The night after, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Elias lay beside me, one arm draped gently across my waist, his thumb tracing the hem of my shirt. We hadn't spoken since the news. Not really. But his presence said what we couldn't. I don't want to go. I don't want you to wait. I want both things. And I can't have them. Morning resolve. When I woke, he was gone. But only to the workshop. I followed the sound of wood being planed. When I stepped in, he looked up, eyes soft. Like he hadn't slept. Say it, he said quietly. Whatever it is. So I did. I don't want you to go, but I won't be the reason you stay and regret it. His mouth twitched. Something between sorrow and gratitude. I don't want to lose this, he whispered. Then don't, I said. We'll hold it, even when it hurts. The plan. We made a promise, not a dramatic one, not even a forever. Just this, come back to me, I said. I will. And when he kissed me that time, it wasn't soft, it was carved, like something meant to outlast distance, what we did with the time. The next few days were a blur of motion. We finished the sunroom, planted herbs in the garden, painted the door bright blue. He left his flannel in my closet. I left a note in his duffel bag. Folded, unsigned, sealed with one red thread. We didn't say goodbye when the day came. He just kissed me once at the station, then stepped onto the train like a man holding two lives in his hands, one in uniform, one in memory. After, I went home, laid in the bed we had shared. The house didn't feel empty. It felt waiting, and in the quiet, I whispered the only thing I could, come back whole, come back soon. Chapter 17, Love in the Waiting. Sophia, I didn't expect the loneliness to be so quiet. I thought it would roar, break like waves, come in flashes of grief and missing. But no, it was gentle, constant, like a dull ache behind the ribs. The first night without him, I kept the porch light on. Not because I thought he'd come back early, just because I needed something to glow. The letters. His first letter came 5 days after he left. S, it's hot here. I forgot what sand feels like when it bites through your boots. But I'm thinking about your garden, about the way your lips taste after coffee, about the hum your studio makes at night. I'm still with you, even when I'm staring at a cracked sky. I read it 3 times, then folded it into my sketchbook like it was something sacred. Elias. The barracks were different this time, quieter, older, heavier. The men looked younger now, or maybe I just felt older. I kept her name in my chest like breath. Didn't speak it, didn't write it on the wall. But every time I laid down to sleep, I saw her porch light. Still on, still waiting. Sophia. The second letter was slower, sadder. S, we lost a kid yesterday, not ours. A local. Stepped too close to something buried. I held his sister while she screamed. I thought of you the whole time. Your hands, the way you held me without fixing anything. I wish I was home. I wish I was building the railing with you. I'm tired, but I'm coming back. That night, I lit a candle for the boy, and another for Elias's silence. The house, I threw myself into the final details. The railing on the stairs, the bookshelf he measured by eye, the skylight we once argued about. I spoke to the walls while I worked, sometimes softly, sometimes not. He's not gone, I'd say, just not here. Elias. The days blurred, sweat, dust, orders, maps. But every night I wrote something, not always a letter, sometimes a phrase, a drawing, a memory. The way she said come home without crying. The sound of rain through her hair. The silence between us when we weren't afraid. Some of them I'd send, others I kept, like proof that I still belong somewhere. Sophia. Then came the silence. No letters, no messages. Not for 11 days. I told myself he was busy, that mail was slow, that maybe he was just tired. But on the 12th day, I cracked, cried in the sunroom until my body curled up like paper left in the rain. I almost called his commander, almost packed a bag, almost booked a ticket to nowhere. But instead, I stood in the garden, and whispered, "Come back." Elias, the patrol had gone sideways. Nothing catastrophic. No one lost. But it shook me. For a moment, lying in the dirt, I thought, this is it. This is the silence she'll hear. But I came back, with bruised ribs, a cut on my arm, and a hunger I couldn't name. I wrote her that night. I almost didn't write you tonight. But that's how you lose things, by choosing silence. So here I am, bruised. Here, yours. Tell the house I'm coming home soon. Tell yourself, too. E. Chapter 18, The Sound of His Name. He came home on a Tuesday. I hadn't expected the call, not yet. But when the phone rang that morning and I heard his voice, low, rough, tired, I dropped the mug I was holding. It didn't break. But I did. The arrival. I stood on the platform like a ghost, hands in my coat pockets, heart beating so loudly I couldn't hear the train. And then, there he was. Tall, thin, tan skin wind-burned, eyes that looked older than I remembered. But it was him, and when he saw me, something in his shoulders softened, just slightly. As if he'd been holding tension he didn't know how to set down until I appeared. We didn't kiss right away. We didn't run. We just stood there, looking at each other like a truth returned from war. The first words. He stepped closer, took my hand, held it like something fragile. "Hi," he said. I nodded. "Hi." Then I reached for his face, and only when I touched him did I realize I'd been holding my breath for weeks. Back home. The house welcomed him like it remembered. The door creaked the same way. The couch still sagged slightly to the left. The windows let in gold at 5:30, but he didn't move the same. He walked like someone who expected the floor to shift beneath him. Spoke like someone still translating his thoughts from silence. I made tea. He sat in the sunroom, staring out at the garden we'd planted. It all kept growing, he said softly. "So did I whispered back. The first night. That night we lay in bed without touching for a long time. He didn't reach for me. I didn't press. And finally, in the dark, he said, "I don't know if I'm the same." I turned toward him, reached for his hand. "You don't have to be." He exhaled, a sound half breath, half collapse. "It's not that I'm scared of you not loving me anymore," he said. "It's that I don't know how to love you the same way I did before." I kissed his palm. "Then we'll learn a new way." What touch means now. The next morning, I woke with his hand on my back. Not heavy, not possessive, just there. I didn't move. I let him hold me. And when I turned to face him, the look in his eyes wasn't joy. It wasn't sorrow. It was presence. "You said once," he murmured, "that you didn't need fixing, just someone to stay." And I meant it. Then let me stay like this. Even if I'm slower, even if I'm quiet, that's the kind of staying I trust the most. The studio again. Later that day, I brought him into the studio, showed him the sketches, the finished sunroom, the skylight, and I pulled out a blueprint I hadn't shown anyone, not even him before he left. "What's this?" "A second story. Guest room, library, maybe a nursery someday." He didn't answer right away, then looked at me like I'd just spoken a future he hadn't dared imagine. "You think we'll still be here?" he asked. "I know we will." His name. That evening, I whispered his name when he fell asleep beside me, Elias. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. So I said it again, softer, Elias, because there's something sacred about speaking someone's name when they're safe beside you. Because the first time I said it, it was fear, and now it was home. Chapter 19, The Light We Built. We didn't make a big announcement. No confetti, no parties, no grand gesture to mark the after. But life, it began again anyway. It crept in slowly. In the way he refilled my tea before I asked. In the way I hummed in the studio while he built the new shelf. In the way we touched each other with knowing, not hesitation. Grief had made us gentle. Love made us intentional. The small gathering. One afternoon, I invited the neighbors over. 3 people, 2 dogs. a bottle of wine, and a pot of soup. Elias grilled in the garden. I watched him from the kitchen window, sleeves rolled, laughing softly as one of the dogs tried to steal a sausage. He looked whole, not healed, not untouched, but grounded, present. And in that moment, something inside me whispered, "This is your life now." And I believed it. The wall. Later that week, we painted the last blank wall in the hallway, the one we'd saved. We mixed the paint ourselves, soft pearl and pale gold. "Why gold?" he asked. I smiled. "It reminds me of that hour, when everything looks honest." He kissed my forehead. "Then let's keep that light here. Letters and ashes." I placed Elias's letters, the ones from the desert, into a box and tucked it behind the bookshelf. Not to forget them, but to say, we lived through that. Sometimes surviving is the most sacred thing love can do. A future in pencil. One rainy afternoon, Elias brought in a notebook. It had hand-sketched floor plans, ideas for the second story, notes about insulation and skylights, and maybe a tiny upstairs library. "You drew all this?" I asked, surprised. "In my bunk. Kept me sane." "What's this room?" "Reading nook," he grinned. "For your future novels." I stared at him. And then I asked, "Do you want that with me?" He didn't even hesitate. "There's no version of it without you." The question. It came 2 nights later. We were lying in the garden, stargazing under the blanket. My head rested on his shoulder. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Not a ring, but a small piece of driftwood, shaped like a heart, with a tiny silver nail through the center. "I found it near the base," he said. "Kept it in my pack." I told myself, if I got home and you still wanted me, I'd ask. Ask what? If I could stay, not just in the house, but in your life. I blinked. Tears filled my eyes but didn't fall. "That's not a question," I said. "Then let me try again." He turned toward me, holding the driftwood gently. "Sophia Leclerc, can I stay? Every day, every storm, every season, for as long as you'll have me?" I nodded. "You already are. The promise." We didn't talk about weddings. Not that night, just promises, the kind that sound like, "I'll make coffee even when I'm tired. I'll walk beside you when words won't come. I'll keep building with you, even in winter." Chapter 20, what we call home. Seasons passed. Spring softened into summer. The garden bloomed wild and full. Basil, lavender, tomatoes that leaned too far toward the sun. The skylight leaked once during a storm. Elias fixed it with a laugh and a smear of caulk on his cheek. We lived, day by day, not waiting for something, not recovering from something, just living. The house finished. The second story was completed in October. Whitewashed beams, polished floors, a narrow staircase with brass rails. The reading nook became my favorite place. A window seat overlooking the coast, with cushions we stitched together from old fabric and soft blue thread. One evening, as Elias read aloud from a dog-eared poetry collection, I rested my head in his lap and whispered, "We built this." He looked down at me, eyes full of something quiet and certain. "We are this." Letters and light. I started writing again, not just sketches, not fragments, real pages. A story based loosely on us, on Luca, on grief, on the house that healed slowly beneath the weight of love. I wrote during the gold hour, the way I once did as a girl. And sometimes Elias would come in just to listen. "That part's me," he'd say, grinning. "You wish," I'd tease. But he was right. He was in every sentence, even the ones I hadn't written yet. Luca's birthday. We lit a candle on Luca's birthday. No cake, no ceremony. Just the two of us in the studio, his favorite jazz record playing in the background. I read one of his letters aloud, the last one he wrote me a year before he died. At the end, I said, "Thank you for the house." And I swear, the light flickered just so, a visit. Julian came by that winter. He brought wine, looked older, quieter. He stood in the sunroom for a long time and finally said, he'd be proud of you, of all of this. I nodded. I hope so. No, Julian said. I know so. We didn't speak of debt, of contracts, of the pain in the past. Only of what remained, growth, stillness, memory, love, morning routines. We built our days around simple things. Bread rising in the kitchen, warm socks on cold floors. Elias leaving notes in the bathroom mirror, steamy, writing lines of dialogue on grocery receipts. Somewhere in the middle of a February snowstorm, I realized this is what safety feels like. Not perfect, just known. A letter to him. One morning when Elias went into town for supplies, I wrote him a letter. You asked me once if you could stay. I want you to know, you never had to ask. You were already part of this house the moment you touched its walls. Part of my life the moment you didn't try to fix me. Part of my heart the moment you stayed. And this isn't a story about rescue. It's about recognition. Come back soon. I'm making soup. As I left it on the porch railing, he found it, smiled through the window, and kissed me the second he walked back in. What we call home. People ask sometimes, when they visit, how did you know? And I always answer the same way. When I said his name in the dark, and he stayed. When the house creaked and he listened. When grief sat between us, and he reached for my hand. That's how I knew, because home isn't built in walls. It's in eyes that see you, hands that hold you, a voice that says, I'm still here. Epilogue. A short passage 1 year later, we planted a tree behind the house. It was small then. Now it's taller than the window. I like to sit under it while I write. Elias brings me tea. Sometimes a kiss on the cheek. Sometimes a story from the town. And when I ask him what he's thinking, he just says, this. Always this.